Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Jonathan Rui, GINSA's Director of Foreign Policy and the moderator for today's webinar, All's Not Quiet on the Northern Front, where we'll discuss the origins, objectives, and risks of escalation regarding Hezbollah's recent aggressions on the Israel-Lebanon border. I'm privileged, as always, to be joined by retired IDF Major General Yaakov Amidror. In addition to being a distinguished fellow here at GINSA's Gemunder Center, he is also the Anne and Greg Rosthandler Senior Fellow at the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. Among many other things, he was also the National Security Advisor to the Prime Minister of Israel and the head of the Israeli National Security Council. Thank you, as always, to our audience for joining us today. If you have a question for General Amidror, please type it into the Q&A box on your Zoom screen. A little bit by way of context before we start today's discussion. In recent weeks and months, we have seen an uptick in tensions along Israel's northern border amid a number of Hezbollah provocations, including, perhaps most notably, building military tents inside Israeli-controlled territory along the blue line that demarcates the border. In parallel, and in the context of ongoing internal Israeli disputes and potential distractions over judicial reform, Hezbollah's leader Hassan Nasrallah recently gloated that Israel is, quote, on the path to collapse, fragmentation, and disappearance. He also said, quote, Israel won't dare to take one step in the territory against the tent on the border because it knows what will happen. In response, Israeli officials have warned against further Hezbollah provocations, including Defense Minister Gallant recently saying Israel will, quote, send Lebanon back to the Stone Age if there's any heightened confrontation with Israel. Already in May, a couple months ago, the head of Israeli military intelligence sounded the alert publicly that, quote, Nasrallah is close to making a mistake that could plunge the region into a big war. All of this underscores the potential for serious escalation along Israel's northern border, which is covered extensively in GINSA's comprehensive 2018 report entitled Israel's Next Northern War, which I encourage everyone here to read or at least glance through on our website. The report is indeed comprehensive, but it contains a standalone executive summary that's much briefer. So, General, with all that by way of backdrop, I'd like to start by asking you, what, if anything, has changed in Hezbollah's decision-making where Nasrallah is now taking all these steps that raise threats along the border, because it seems like we've heard for years that he learned a very valuable lesson in 2006 when he started a war for which he was not prepared for Israel's response. What, if anything, is different, strategically, politically, militarily now compared to this relative quiet we've seen since 2006?
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. I think that what we see is a very interesting situation in which the basis for the attitude or the assessment of Hezbollah was not changed. Nasrallah understands the huge gap between Hezbollah and Israel and the capabilities of Israel to destroy the organization and around the organization, some parts of Lebanon, because the missiles and the rockets stored by Hezbollah in many places. Hezbollah and Nasrallah knows that he can launch many rockets and missiles and succeeding to attack very important places in Israel. Some of them very crucial to the infrastructure. Israel is very poor with the redundancy because we are a very little country and we don't have redundancy to some very important systems. So the basic situation was not changed and the assessment of Nasrallah was not changed. What Nasrallah feels probably is that the Israelis are more cautious using their capabilities, their military might. I think that the beginning is somewhere around the attempt of Nasrallah to show that he is strong enough to force Israel to sign the Gaza agreement. Israel gave up all its territorial demands, we had very good argument, but we preferred to sign the agreement because of many reasons. One of them that there was that we could take the gas out of the sea immediately, and the Lebanese, I don't know, it will take probably a few years. But anyhow, the net result of the situation around the gas infrastructure was that the Hezbollah sent 3 RPVs into the area. We destroyed them, but we didn't retaliate. Then we gave up all our territorial demands, and the agreement was signed. And for Nasrallah, that was a huge success. Then he sent a terrorist with explosive to Megiddo Junction. It's 100 kilometers south of the border. It is a route leading to the north, very important one. And the junction itself is very crowded. We were lucky enough, and only one Israeli was injured. But the retaliation was very, very, very shallow. We didn't make anything. We acted in Syria, and it was clear that we're afraid to begin something bigger than that. Then Hezbollah understood that Nasrallah understood this is the situation, and he began to play around the border. And Hezbollah warrior took one camera from the fence. Then they built a tent 32 meters into the area of Israel, crossing the line. There is no fence there. And so on and so forth. And each operation for itself is not something that make Israel any difference. It's not true about the explosive in Megiddo Junction, because that could be a disaster, but practically nothing happened. The tent that everyone is speaking about, no one knows where it is, no one can see it. It's 30 meters in our side. In the winter, they cannot live there anyhow. It's nothing. But it is true that each event for itself is not dangerous and not problematic, but the series of these events is a very good example how Nasrallah is ready to take more risks, because he understands that Israel is not ready to take the risks and will not retaliate. What is the problem here? That one day he might be in a situation in which he will not measure the right action that he is doing, and that will lead to escalation, and then you lose control on the process, and you end with the big operation. This is why the situation is so sensitive, not because that each of these operations is important, not at all, other than the explosive in Megiddo Junction. Each of them is not important, but it might lead to a situation in which, because of mistake, because it will be, I don't know what, it's very unknown what might happen. So this is why some people in the intelligence saying that Israel is closer to a war more than in the past, and it is not because Nasrallah wants a war. It's not because Nasrallah is making a mistake about the capabilities of Israel. He might make a mistake on the readiness of Israel to take risks. The domestic issue in Israel is a very interesting factor in this process. On one side, Nasrallah is saying, let the Israelis to collapse into their own problems. We don't have to interfere. It will happen anyhow. It's the end of the Jewish states. It's a fight between tribes, as it was declared, written under one picture of the protesters clashing with the police. They called it the war of the tribes. But on the other hand, it might add to the feeling of Nasrallah that he can play and take higher risks because Israel, in the present domestic situation, cannot really have the ability to react, to go to a big operation. Ironically, some of members of the opposition blaming Netanyahu that it is his interest to have such an operation, because that will cement again the society and easier for him. So if you ask me what is the situation, it's more dangerous because Nasrallah might make a mistake. Does Nasrallah want the escalation? The answer is no.
So if Nasrallah does not want the escalation, but he's taking advantage of what he sees as sort of, as you said, Israel's reduced willingness to take risks at the moment. And I know you mentioned at the outset the maritime boundary agreement last year, and I know that was under a different Israeli government, and there was American pressure in that regard. But now, what do you see as, I want to make sure I heard you correctly, Israel is not willing to take some of the risks needed to sort of change Nasrallah's thinking? Is that what you said? Or what is Israel's, is there an appetite or lack of appetite from the Israeli side? I know you said there's a theory that Netanyahu would love a rally around the flag effect, but putting that aside, in terms of a sort of strategic calculus, is Israel kind of hoping to keep would they like to limit the risk of escalation?
No, democracies are not running to wars. It's very rare that democracies are running to wars. And the appetite in Israel, as in the past, was not to take risks that might lead to a big operation or a war. If there is no any other choice, Israel can do it. And we went at least once to a preventive war in '56. It might happen that someday someone in Israel will say, guys, if we don't stop him now, we might find ourselves in a very dire situation. And it might happen. Cannot be excluded. For the present, the atmosphere in Israel is not to run to a war. It is to try to prevent it. We have time. We are using the time to be stronger in the future. By the way, Hezbollah is doing the same. But we don't have any interest to have a war.
Is there, so obviously, Hezbollah is the primary proxy of Iran in the region. Do you see, or do you foresee any, what's Iran's position in this? Is it actively encouraging Nasrallah to try to engage and erode Israeli deterrence? Are they, is it a green light, yellow light, red light situation from Iran's perspective?
I think that it is very good question, because Iran didn't find up till now a way to show Israel that Israel is paying a price for the operations in Syria and some of the operations that, according to foreign sources, Israel did in Iran. Look, very prominent leader of the atomic agency of Iran was killed. Ali Soleimani was assassinated by America. Previous to that, Imad Murania, the Qasem Soleimani of Hezbollah, lost his head. Some operations, according to foreign sources inside Iran, relating to the nuclear facilities or something else which is important for the Iranians. And the Iranians didn't find a way how to retaliate. Will they be happy to see Nasrallah is doing it? It's a good question. I think that in some operations, they might want him to react. But at the end of the day, I think that for the Iranians, Nasrallah is the big actor in the deterrence game to prevent Israel to make the decision to attack the nuclear facility of Iran. So I'm not going that they will be happy from a big operation in which Nasrallah will lose part of his capabilities. Depends very much on the kind of a war that Israel will conduct. So it's an interesting question when the Iranians are pushing him and when the Iranians are holding him. I think that for the moment, they will not be sorry if they will find a way to make one big operation and Israel will find itself in a situation, okay, what next?
And there's another dimension to all this, and this is something for our audience that that JINSA has done work on recently. I encourage you to find it on our website. Is that we saw in April and May. I mean, you mentioned the Megiddo Junction attack. There was also an attack a rocket attack from southern Lebanon into Israel, which was not attributed to Hezbollah, but came at the same time as rocket fire from Gaza, and then also from Syria, as well as uprisings, disturbances in the West Bank. To what extent are these Hezbollah actions part of a sort of a broader multi-front effort by other proxies?
I think that this is a picture which was drawn by the media without any connection to the reality, or almost no connection to reality. In the West Bank, there was not any uprising. It was very quiet during the operation in Gaza. Yes, the Islamic Jihad tried to do something, but it was immediately intercepted by us. The missiles or the rockets coming from Lebanon, we know for sure that Hezbollah didn't take part in it. It was a friction of Hamas, which acted without the knowledge of Hezbollah. I don't know about the commanders on the ground, but Hezbollah as organization was not involved and didn't have any idea about it. And the area from which it was launched in Syria is no man's land. Everyone can do whatever he wants. And the Iranians didn't retaliate at all. So I think that there are situations in which we might see multi-front situation. If we take the nuclear facility, Iran probably will make all the efforts that Hezbollah will react and maybe Islamic Jihad in Gaza. But I don't see Hezbollah reacting when we are attacking in Gaza, or Gaza attacking, we are taking part in any operation that we will begin in Lebanon. And with all due respect, I don't see the Iranians ready to take the risk that we are attacking in Lebanon or in Gaza. They will interfere, and then Iran will be under threat of our kinetic capabilities. I don't see the Iranians ready to pay the price. They are ready to sacrifice the last Lebanese. They are not ready to risk the first Iranian. So I think that multi-front is a possibility, something that we have a scenario that cannot be excluded, but it is more when we initiate something big, and less when the other side is initiating something.
So later on, I want to get back to this something big question, what escalation might actually look like and entail. But just to follow up the previous question, so if Hezbollah is not currently, doing this as part of a sort of a multi-front issue, what is, and other than the fact that Hezbollah seeks to degrade and ultimately eliminate Israel, but what's the payoff right now for these provocations? Are there strategic advantages for Nasrallah, or is this audience mostly domestic inside Lebanon?
No, I think that the present provocations are more kind of a test to the strength of Israel and the resilience of Israel. It's not something which is making any harm to Israel. Leave alone the Megiddo Junction, that was something that if succeeded, 10 Israelis would have been killed. We probably be in another situation. But other than that, all the little games around the fence and the tent and so on and so forth, it's just to show that he can and to test Israel's resilience. This is why I believe that it might lead to a mistake, because as a dictatorship, he doesn't understand how democracy is acting.
So I guess sort of maybe one or two more questions before we get to what that mistake might lead to and what escalation would entail. But supposedly there's a UN peacekeeping force whose mandate along the border is to help prevent provocations and was put in place after the 2006 war, known by the acronym UNIFIL, and its mandate is about to be renewed. Is UNIFIL playing any type of useful role currently? Should its mandate be renewed or reformed? That's an issue that's obviously been a question for years now.
UNIFIL didn't report about any one example of weapon systems coming to the south, something that it theoretically should report, or Hezbollah forces going down to the south. Never was reported. If you take UNIFIL reports, the Hezbollah is not in the south, and nothing is happening on the ground. And you understand that it is totally wrong description of the situation. What UNIFIL is important is for a kind of a mediator. If there is a tension somewhere, UNIFIL is coming in between the two sides and can mediate the agreement, the situation, change, or whatever. UNIFIL does not prevent any attempt of the Iranians to go to the south or to bring weapon system to the south, and so on and so forth. So it is very, very, very not important for us.
Before we pivot to a sort of different set of questions, I'd like to remind our audience, if you have any questions for General Amedrour, please just type them in the Q&A box on your screen, and we'll get to them at some point before the webinar is over. So, General, we keep using the word escalation from the start here along the border, and perhaps some of our audiences, when they're used to hearing about rocket fire from Iranian proxies on Israel's borders, they think of maybe the 2021 Gaza conflict, 2014, or even some of the more limited operations we've seen since then, which, while they pose real threats to Israel, Israel is largely able to deal with kinetically and in terms of air defense as well. I guess in terms of, is the potential for escalation on the Lebanon border something that's sort of an order of magnitude or categorically different? Do you think there could be, if escalation could be limited in some way, or are you worried that it could potentially spiral out of control into a major conflict?
What will happen in reality, I don't know. What I know is what is the capacity of the other side and what are his intentions. Hezbollah has today more than 100,000 rockets and missiles. They have drones, and they have strong forces along the border now. So any war between us and them will be probably, most at the beginning at least, a huge exchange of kinetic missiles and rockets. We did a targeting process in the last few years, which led to a situation in which we have thousands and thousands of targets. How to reach them, in what situation will they be? Do we have all the information which is needed to destroy it in one precise bomb, or we have to use more because it is not exactly identified? Good question that not all of them can be answered. But one thing is very clear. Many thousands of rockets and missiles will be launched from Lebanon into Israel. Probably 15% of them will reach their targets. But if it is out of, I don't know, 10,000 in 3 days or 4 days, it's huge. It's around 1,000 or 1,500 missiles that will reach Israel. Some of them are more accurate than in the past. Even if a third of them will be spread within areas that we don't have any interest to defend, it's too empty it's thousands will reach the targets. And Israel will react immediately with a huge force of the Air Force to destroy any target that is important according to priorities that we are doing all the time. And it will be devastating on both sides. Israel probably is in a better position to destroy Hezbollah, but it's not going to be easy. And Hezbollah will have some achievements in the exchange of these kinetic capabilities. The main question will be after 3, 4, 5 days, what to do with the ground forces that will be then very well ready to go to maneuver in South Lebanon. And this is very much depends on the international situation and what will be the level of success of our targeting operation. So I don't even answer, but no question that within 48 hours, the ground forces will be ready to be launched into Lebanon.
For our audience, just to give a sense of scale, and in general, I'm not quoting you here, but I think in the 2006 war, which saw heavy rocket and artillery fire from Hezbollah into Israel, I believe there was something like 3,000 or 4,000 rockets that were launched in that conflict. And I've seen estimates for if there is a full-scale third Lebanon war, Hezbollah may be able to launch that many projectiles per day, at least at the outset of the conflict, just to try to give our audience some sense of the scale that we're talking about here. So just to jump around a little bit, I know at least in the past we've heard that Israel has red lines about capabilities they will not permit Hezbollah to obtain or develop, and particularly including precision guided munitions or PGMs. And then just in the few days ago, we heard that Israel hit a facility in Syria this week that was involved in developing PGMs for Hezbollah. I think it's relevant to a lot of things we're talking about here and more broadly for our JINSA audience. Do you have any update for us on the status of Hezbollah's PGM capabilities? And would this ever reach a point where Israel may have to launch preemptive action to address that before it becomes fully realized?
Hezbollah has much more quantities of PGMs than it had in the past. They have the capability to make all the technical needs to produce it in Lebanon. They are doing it because it's more complicated, slower than they had in mind, but slowly they are building this capability, and Israel will face precise weapon systems in the next future. Will it might lead to a preemptive attack? Cannot be excluded, but not for the moment.
So we've got some good questions from our audience here that I want to be sure to get to. And this is sort of builds off what we're talking about today, but sort of takes on another large subject altogether as well. And JINSA just put out a paper called No Daylight on the need for a close U.S. support for Israel if and when there is any Israeli military action against Iran's nuclear facilities. And we lay out in the paper why that may be a rising possibility. But if that does happen and push comes to shove, Gerald, do you think it's likely, and what might be the factors that determine whether Hezbollah retaliates against Israel for something Israel does against Iran, because as you mentioned, Hezbollah is Iran's trump card.
Yeah, no question that for the Iranians, this is the main reason to build Hezbollah. There are some Lebanese important reasons, but for Nasrallah, for Iran, national interest, not religious interest, national interest. It is to build strong Hezbollah to deter Israel and to use Hezbollah if Israel attack in Iran. The probability is very high that if we attack Iran, we will have to face many rockets coming from Lebanon.
Is there any, what do you see as the potential if and I'm using the word if here, obviously, if Israeli were to have to deal with Iran's nuclear program kinetically, would there also be an impetus to also deal with at least some of Hezbollah's most worrisome capabilities at the same time, or would they sort of have to await potential retaliation?
This is a technical question that I don't have an answer to. It very much depends on the intelligence that we will have on those. If it was clear, very totally clear from the intelligence that we might face an attack of Hezbollah a few hours afterwards, because the preparations were identified or whatever, or one of our agents reported to us that this is the attempt of Hezbollah. And it's a question of technicalities. There is a good logic to do it in parallel, but there are many, or at least few arguments why to postpone it. For example, because we want to achieve in the first wave in Iran the biggest achievement that can be. So leave alone Lebanon and focus yourself in with the Iranian issue. It's only one example for those arguments.
And so, given that we're talking about now Hezbollah in this larger context of Iran, clearly the Biden administration has adopted a posture of just trying to avoid escalation, avoid a conflict, even if it doesn't address some of the underlying drivers of those tensions. So presumably the Biden administration would want to, be active in trying to reduce tensions along Israel's northern border. Have you seen any U.S. role in trying to reduce the current tensions, reaching out through Lebanon?
I don't think that America today has any influence on the Iranians or Hezbollah. I mean, if there is something very limited, very much defined, like don't enrich to 90%. This is something very clear, very crystallized definition of where the red line is. Other than that, I don't see any influence or leverage of America on the Iranians or Hezbollah.
And no attempt to work through contacts in Lebanon to message to Hezbollah to reduce tensions?
I don't know. That might happen, but it's not important.
So we got a couple other questions here. This one is sort of gets back to what we were talking about earlier and at the outset of the webinar. Given that there's, I think it's fair to say, growing political divisions and persistent protests in Israel, including potential threats by reservists not to serve. The question from our audience is, does that have any impact on Israel's capabilities along the northern border?
Not yet, but if that continue and actually people will not come for training and so on and so forth, that might lead to a situation in which some of the capabilities will be reduced, because you have to keep your level of preparedness by training every few, I don't know what, depends what is the exact issue. So if that will be a long process which will not stop, and people stop to train themselves or to volunteer to be trained, that might lead to a deterioration in some of the capabilities. We are not there yet.
So another question from our audience, and this goes back to the issue of the military tent along the border with which we began the talk. So the question is, Israel is not interested in taking risks that could escalate to war. But yet Hezbollah crossing the blue line and putting up these military tents and keeping them there sends a terrible signal from the Israeli perspective. We've heard Defense Minister Gallant issue a pretty full-throated threat that, if Hezbollah, I believe if they escalate or try further provocations, they'll get set back to the Stone Age. But what can Israel do to stress that this particular violation won't be sustained, can't be tolerated?
I'm not sure that Israel has the capability to do something without doing something. I mean, if Israel reacts, we have to ask ourselves. Let's take the tent as an example. It's 32 meters inside Israel, does not control any important area, not for the Northern Command and not for the state of Israel. It doesn't have any implication on the ground. We continue to build the fence and whatever we are doing in the north. So the question will be, okay, should we pay the price of the risk to be in a war because we do something to, I don't know, put fire on the tent? This is why I don't think that Israel is rushing for any escalation.
And this is the sort of the second time we've discussed, Israel's not in any rush for escalation, which can make perfect sense, and is not in a rush to do anything risky. Are there sort of any particular reasons why, specifically driving Israel's reluctance to do anything right now, to buy time in some sense for building up capabilities or restoring deterrence?
Look, Israel is in a permanent situation of preventing the next war. So I was told once by our ex-prime ministers that the most important job of the government is to broaden the gap between the wars, because this is the time that Israel is becoming stronger, building its economy, new project in the technology, and so on and so forth. We know that we cannot bring to the Middle East to a European situation in which there is no tension between France and Germany. It's not in our hands, it's not in our capacity. It will not work. We tried to do it once with Lebanon, and the president and the elected guy was murdered after less than 48 hours. We know that we cannot change the Middle East. We cannot reach the Berlin of the Middle East in any war. So what we try is to postpone and to have the time which is needed to build Israeli to be stronger. And remember, the GNP of Israel today is surpassing the GNP per capita of France and Britain. So it's only one example. So we are not in a rush, because none of this Hezbollah operation is risking something important or even not important, risking something for Israel. It's not pleasant to read that they took a camera from the fence, but it was a camera that probably was bought, I don't know, in China or Germany. It's not something which is threatening either. This is what I want to emphasize. And this is why we are very cautious not to react in a way that it might lead to an escalation. But one day might come, and it might be next week, that someone in Israel will say enough is enough, and we will react, and let's see what will happen.
There's, I want to keep shifting around. We've got so many good questions coming in. You mentioned earlier, and we've seen it in news reports, one of the threats, Hezbollah obviously has rockets and missiles, including PGMs, but in some sense, combat drones could be considered PGMs, and Hezbollah certainly has some capabilities here.
Yeah, no question.
Do you think, or have you assessed at all that given all the drones that Iran is also sending to Russia for use in Ukraine, have you assessed that Iran is gaining any useful experience or knowledge from watching that play out in Ukraine that could be used against Israel in various forms?
Theoretically, yes. I don't know what actually the Iranians can learn from that. The level of success of these drones is not so high.
Yes.
I mean, it's a permanent danger in the battleground, but the level of success is not so high, and I'm not sure that our ability to intercept the drones is less than the Ukrainians. So we are learning it. We are preparing ways to deal with it. It's a question of doctrine and technology. It's a combination of the two. And we try to be in a better position to deal with it. By the way, if you want to see a good example, is what was published after we succeeded to intercept the 3 drones which have been used by Hezbollah that was our gas facility in the Mediterranean. All of them were destroyed. 3 out of 3.
And so we have, General, I want to let you go at midnight your time. I appreciate you devoting all your time for Jinsa late at night. So we'll have just sort of one final question from the audience, and it sort of reflects this concern about what escalation could actually lead to and look like. I think an underappreciated aspect of Hezbollah's capabilities may be their air defenses. Do you see these as a potential concern? And are there any game-changing things in terms of Hezbollah acquiring better air defenses that could all, like the PGM issue, also be a trigger for conflict potentially?
They have more capability than they had in the past, no question. It's not the level of capability that they had in mind when they began the process 10 years ago, 10 years ago. But yes, they have more capabilities. It is about anti ship missiles, anti-air missiles, precise rockets and missiles. But what I can say is that Israel also improved its capabilities during this time. So I'm not sure the gap is wider. Yes, they have more capabilities. I'm not sure that the gap is wider.
So with that relatively optimistic note, I'm going to, again, take my moderator's privilege and close out our webinar a little bit early, at least here on the American side, although it's certainly midnight in Israel. So again, thank you, General Amadror, as always, for your time and your thoughts.
And whenever you feel it's needed, I'm ready to learn.
We are certainly not afraid to take you up on that offer time and time again. Thank you again to our audience.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and good night.
Yes.
And Shabbat Shalom to those who preserve Shabbat.
Yes, Shabbat Shalom to those who observe. And thank you again all, and we look forward to seeing you again on another Jinsa webinar soon. Thank you. Take care.
Bye.